Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a very special standalone episode, Queen of Blood from 1966, starring Dennis Hopper and John Saxon. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming book, California Tiki. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And welcome back from the Rio Grande Valley, Professor David Bowles, who has received awards from the American Library Association, the Texas Institute of Letters, and the Texas Associated Press to the dozen books he's written. He's recently added Feathered Serpent, Dark Heart of Sky, Myths of Mexico, and the YA steampunk graphic novel Clockwork Curandera. Say hello, David.
Hey, ¿qué onda?
Hey, what's a good response to ¿Qué onda? On the bien, I suppose. And
That works.
finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. She's also a member of the improv a cappella vocal group In Harmony's Way. Say hello, Julia.
Hello, Julia. Sorry.
Yes. Always.
I can't
You
not.
had your opportunity to say hello, Julia, and you screwed up.
I did. I said it quietly.
Oh, I did. I'm sorry. See, that's how.
David,
And then I
what
figured
is the
because I was
right
like, you know,
what is the right response to ¿Qué onda?
To ¿Qué onda? Something like aquí no más, way. Something like that.
Okay.
Aquí no más.
I can't-
If you want to be really casual, I'm just here.
Nothing going on here. It's all okay.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Okay, Queen of Blood is a 1966 color science fiction horror film directed by Curtis Harrington, who is the guy who made Night Tide, just so you know, that stars John Saxon, Basil Rathbone, Dennis Hopper, and Judi Meredith. The film is based on the screenplay for the earlier Soviet feature, A Dream Come True. So in this one, an alien species contacts Earth to say they're coming across the galaxy to make contact. Their ship crashes on Mars, and Earthship is sent up to rescue them. And when they locate the downcraft, they find a single alien humanoid, a green lady who actually starts killing them in their sleep. A strange green-skinned female. And as they begin to die, drained of their blood, they make their way back towards Earth. So
I'm gonna stop you there and say she doesn't kill them in their sleep. She kills them by just hypnotizing them.
You're right. You're absolutely right. She does stalk them by night, however. So it is kind of funny considering that they're in space. I'm not saying this
So
is a bad
what's
thing.
like by night? What does by night mean?
Yeah, but they don't.
Right, well,
If she's a
When
vampire
during the
by
sleep
night.
period of the group, she will
Yeah.
kill the one who's conscious by hypnotizing them.
I guess that's
Because
true.
one person stays awake.
All right.
Yeah.
So almost nothing I said was accurate. And yet, if I if I
You
had
aren't
said-
supposed to tell people that.
So, gosh, I've been haunted by this movie since I was a kid. It's kind of fun to talk about it. Let's get opening thoughts. You do not have to have loved this movie as much as I wanted to talk about it. However, unlike other films that I really wanted to talk about, I have seen this movie, and I have a lot of things to say. So, let's do it this way. Let's go Tony, Julia, David, and then I'll go if there's anything left in the opening thoughts. Tony, your opening impressions, Queen of Blood.
It's really slow. Also, if you are a fan of Alien and want to see where that came from, here you go. Like, if for some reason Ridley Scott said, I have never seen this movie, while I don't know if I would argue with him in person, I would be inclined to call bullshit on that.
Yeah.
So if
Like
he
beat
said,
after beat
no,
after
I've never seen it, I don't know, somebody told me about it one time, sure. But when you watch this, it's also, 60s sci-fi. I think a lot of people might not give it the time of day because being low budget, it's, the costumes, especially like the space like outfits and the all of the high-tech stuff looks pretty goofy nowadays. And I think that's part, we can get into it later, but I think that's part of when people see this and they want to mystery science theater things. It's kind of played as a goof, whereas of the time it might have looked, oh, that's what high tech stuff looks like,
Yeah.
It's definitely, it's got some great actors in it. I love John Saxon, Dennis Hopper, Basil Rathbone, awesome. It's also definitely of a time. There's a decent amount of science mansplaining going on. And I think this is what some people, when they look at movies from this era, are like, oh, I can't get into that because, look how men act and stuff like that. I get it. For me, I can compartmentalize that and just watch it as exactly what it is. Not everybody can. If you can, I think it's worth watching just for historical reference. I don't know if you'll revisit it a lot, other than it's kind of an interesting, this is what 66 sci-fi was like.
Yeah. Wonderful. And there's so much there that I want to respond to. So remember everything you said, because Julia, what are your opening thoughts?
Well, I agree that yes, definitely the inspiration for Aliens, although not don't watch it thinking, oh, if I like Aliens, I will like this, because that doesn't necessarily follow.
Yeah, that may or may not. Your mileage will vary on that. That's for sure.
Yes, it is an hour and a half that feels like 3 hours and a half. It does go very, very slowly, despite the star power that's in this film, because you have Dennis Hopper, you have John Saxon, you have Basil Rathbone, and yet somehow it really feels, well, it's very low budget, is the thing, and you feel the low budget. And then suddenly there's footage from like much higher budget Russian films, or a Russian film, that gets kind of spiced in there, and you're kind of like, wait, I thought this was super low budget, but now we suddenly have a slightly higher budget footage here, but that's what that is. It's, I don't know. I look forward to talking about this film, because there were definitely some things I wanted to point out, but I'm not going to say that I just really super loved it or anything.
Awesome. David, lay it on us.
Well, I mean, I really dug all the art was under the opening credits. That was the pretty trippy stuff. And all of the wordless scenes lifted from Battle Beyond the Sun and A Dream Come True it was actually pretty interesting. And you know what it reminded me a lot of? It reminded me of the most recent season 3 of Twin Peaks. All the stuff that's happening on the Giants' home planet or whatever other dimension. Just really stylized and silent and slow, and that kind of stuff was fun. And if it had just gone on like that, I would have been delighted. But the minute we actually had actors talking, standing around in their shabby pre-Star Trek bullshit sets, it was really, really tough to sit through.
Their mustard colored 90s clothes.
Yeah. Oh, you have to love what they thought the 90s was going to be like. Everybody's going to be wearing these quilted jackets. All the jackets were quilted and kind of cool. And of course, it didn't. I don't know why it never occurs to anybody that you're not going to be 30 years from now wearing your hair the same way you are now. It just inevitably people are wearing their hair in the same style at the time.
No, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, how is it that they think that this is how people are going to wear their hair forever? But I guess it's really hard to imagine anything different than what you see when it comes to style. Even if it's a little bit different, but it's hard to imagine something completely different.
I think music is the same way. You always see, science fiction movies from the 80s, and inevitably futuristic music sounded like 80s pop, or new wave, and it's kind of sad. But there were once the Queen of Blood, the titular Queen of Blood, awakens and begins to interact. That was kind of fun, because there's this kind of sinister energy to that actress's take on it, and I mean, I enjoyed some of that. And I mean, it could have been a lot more menacing, and she could have been slinking around, but they had a set that was the size of my goddamn kitchen, so it was not there wasn't much slinking around that she could do. There's no place to hide.
It was a little silly.
I want to know where, spoiler alert, I want to know when she was able to hide what she hides. Because there were people in every room all the time. When did she? I guess after she lured somebody to sleep.
I know when that was. That would be after she drained.
Yeah, after she drained the blood, she's like, okay, time to go lay eggs. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't horribly. I didn't want to kill myself, but it was really, really tough, and there were, I mean, even for a film of its time, there were lots of just like, in my opinion, bad choices made about like in the script and convoluted things to get people to certain places, and lots and lots of just convenience sake kind of decisions that we'll get into as we go along. But yeah, I mean, for nostalgia's sake and for a couple of interesting performances, I'd say, well, yeah, you know, whatever. You have it on the background while you're playing chess with your kid or something, but don't sit there and like force yourself to actually pay attention to it.
That's probably the right attitude. I actually remember seeing this movie as a young person, and the notion that the ship was very tiny, you know, and it clearly is. The set clearly takes up a space, indeed, about the size of a garage, separated into a couple compartments, which might be realistic for a ship, but for a story like this, where a creature is stalking people and separating them and you know, and killing them off, you need a ship that's like the size of an aircraft carrier, so that you believably can be far, far away from the action. Whereas in this case, you many times get the impression the actors, I mean, the actual characters would be just sort of barely missing one another as they sort of move from place to place in the plot. Having said that, when I was a kid, I didn't notice that at all. You know, I was totally bought into the notion that this was a big ship and that you know, they had an alien vampire on it. One thing I will say, yeah, there were a few strange choices, and we'll get into the topics a little bit. But there are strange choices, like they do this thing where before they send a trip to Mars, they wanted to send a trip to the moon for the second base there. Now, if you were writing the script from scratch, I'm willing to bet you would skip the intermittent the interstitial
the moon
base.
stopover, right?
I know why. They wanted to use the moon set because they had paid all this money for this Russian footage, and they had a big moon model in that footage that, you know, it's got craters and it's got towers and stuff, and they were like, well,
everybody on Earth, all of the technicians, you know, guy, they all fly to the moon first, and then from there send people to Mars. And like, really, everybody had to.
Yes. Well,
and Jason and I were trying to spend all this time figuring out like why that would be, and I was like, you know, we need to repeat it to ourselves. It's just to show we should really just relax, because we're like, well, is it that they use less fuel because of the there's no atmosphere and there's less gravity?
Well, okay. Actually, I have heard that. So if you wanted to Marvel No Prize this, it's completely logical that you would be launching long trips off of the moon instead of off of
then start from the moon. Don't start
from the moon.
Have everybody on the moon.
Yeah. And I love the fact that Basil Rathbone's most of his parts are just shot like up against a brick wall where he's totally by himself, and
he's got like this sheaf of paper. Don't you love it when he's got like the sheaf of paper and he's like, oh, okay guys, we have deciphered the message being sent to us across the galaxy, and it's like really fucking long, but it basically can be summed up as, we're going to be visiting you like in the next couple of days, so get ready.
Yeah, and isn't that great, you guys? Isn't that great that these aliens are coming to us? That's awesome.
Like, how do
he only had like a day and a half of like footage or something that he filmed.
He got paid $1,500 for that one day.
Yeah.
Getting into the world of just like segueing straight out of any opening thoughts I might have, and the short opening thought is, I'm really glad that we watched this movie because, you know, I like it. But moving past those amazing opening paintings, the opening paintings, but actually we should just note they are by a guy named Klein. They are very, very much like 1960s modern art. You know, they're super cool watercolors of the kind that I remember in the 80s still seeing kind of stuff like this in a lot of like collections of fantastic art, you know, and they're wonderful. That's some neat stuff. You saw similar paintings in the House of Usher. You know, Roger Corman, who was an executive producer on this and was responsible for a lot of the odd choices, he also sort of had an eye for artists, for American artists, and often, you know, used their paintings as opening credits and stuff like that for his movies. That's kind of neat. We cut to the world of Queen of Blood. It is the futuristic world of 1990. Space travel is a thing now. We're going to Earth. We're going to the moon all the time. We've never been to Mars. And I think the thing that I love the most about the place where all these astronauts work is that it looks a lot like a 1960s office park, and everybody in there that works for NASA or whatever it's called, the space agency. The uniform of the space agency is mustard and white. They all wear like these mustard khakis or would you say mustard chinos? Julia? I hear
know.
the judge is ruling on this. One is a khaki is a color, but chinos are a type of
But
pants.
you can
Right?
still wear khakis. People call khaki-colored chinos khakis, so khakis is fine.
But these
Yeah,
are
these are
mustard
definitely
color.
chinos. Yeah.
Then
Mustard
chinos
chinos.
is fine.
They are
Yeah,
mustard
you can call it
chinos. Thank you, David.
But they're not
their
mustard. They're not mustard. The sweaters are mustard, and the chinos are actually either khaki or maybe white, like you said, off
Okay.
white.
All right.
Yeah.
So they're wearing khakis, mustard sweaters, and then these white sort of I don't know what you'd call it. These these pillowy white jackets over it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
That have lining of the same color as the.
yes, they're
the-
wonderful. They remind me
They're
of
really.
like
It's actually a pretty cool outfit. I mean,
no, for sure. I would have worn it in the '80s, and that's what it looks like. It actually looks like an '80s outfit.
Yeah, sure it does.
Yeah, it looks like what Michael J. Fox wears in Back to the Future, except with sleeves.
Yeah, you're right. That jacket kind of looks.
Yes. Yeah. It's that particular kind of lining that they're wearing. Yeah. They look like 80s era douchebags, basically, in what they're wearing.
They just needed like a bunch of flock of seagulls hairstyles,
Yes.
and that would have been perfect.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's cool stuff. You see them at work. It's not a particularly integrated workplace. I don't spot any non-white people in this future world.
There's some women though.
There are women, yes. So they got that going. They have female engineers and that and this is pre-Star
They only
Trek.
sexually harass them a little bit, so that's good.
Yeah, it's just a teensy bit of harassment, and definitely a lot of like mansplaining and kind of like looking
Give me an
down at them.
example of the mansplaining, because I totally don't remember. Now she's in a relationship with John Saxon, so that's a sort of
right.
Yeah. There was no like outright like slapping on the ass kind of stuff that you'd catch in some '50s movies where there was just kind of
yeah.
It's always more just she'll hey, I'm a doctor, or I'm a scientist as well, and here's what I think. And there's just a lot of like, oh yeah, let's
go ahead and stay here. We're gonna go do whatever. You stay on the ship.
Some things. Yeah, that's kind of some things women would say, I guess. It's never outright like just put her down, but there's also not a lot of extreme confidence of like, oh, you're the expert, of course. It is a lot of, well, the men should kind of handle this.
Yes.
That's. I mean, I don't. The problem is because of the era, there aren't a lot of movies that actually aren't that.
Yeah.
Which is why people seem to have more and more of a problem with movies from that era. And I understand it. Like I said before, I kind of compartmentalize it. And I think if you can't push past that, there probably are a lot of like really good movies you're missing that maybe have bits that, of course now we know better and, have moved past that. Well, mostly, or try to anyway.
Well, Tony,
I'm not saying everything's perfect, but like, there's just the general feel of it of, like, cool, women do science, I guess.
But they
kind of
don't,
how it works.
They sort of naturally slide her into a subservient role, even if, but in rank, we're not really given the information, but we're not given outright any particular reason why they would do that, other than that it's the quote unquote natural authority of men. Here's the funny thing.
It's still super progressive that they have her as an astronaut. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It is, and that she gets sent on the Mars mission and not her fiance. That's kind of
cool.
Well, that's a really good point. That's a solid point. They don't think about their relationship at all when assigning them, and that's in keeping with writers who are of an era when they remember World War II, when we sent a lot of women into dangerous situations.
The only thing there's a couple little things, but I can't think of very many right now, except just the fact that the women are wearing skirts is about it. And that is in keeping with the era. It's like women always wore skirts. There's just not going to be equal. The uniforms aren't going to be the same for men and women. But that's about it, really. There was no. I may think of something else later, but it just didn't feel. It felt like a pretty progressive script as far as the.
I wanted to to mention, there's this interesting thing about Tony was saying. A lot of people will forsake an old movie, or they'll look at a movie, and I'm not talking about really controversial stuff like Gone with the Wind. I'm talking about just everyday run-of-the-mill films that have not gendered a lot of essays. And people will say, I'm not sure if I want to watch that because of the representation or this or that or the sexism in the dialogue. I and I don't know jack all about that. I don't know what your personal choice is going to be. I know that my mother's was always interesting. She enjoyed watching older films because she liked making lectures out of the way people were presented in those films. You know, she's like, you could watch a movie from 1963 and it might not tell you much about the human condition in the film, but it certainly tells you a lot about what was going on in 1963. And I've really taken that to heart. Then again, I'm well aware that when I say these things, I speak from a position of profound privilege.
Well, you know, I'm sitting here thinking about this, and there is this interesting subtext that is kind of bubbling up in my mind, and it's that when the Queen of Blood is, you know, awakens and she's looking at the men one by one, she's all like, "Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah," and then she like turns and she's, "Oh shit, there's a fucking woman."
No, I actually told Jason. I said, "Okay, and now cue bitter look when she sees the female," and sure enough, she's like,
and you know, and the character of Laura is the one who is kind of like immune to her and is the one who discovers what's going on and causes her death. Although I really wish she had instead of that she had you know, bonked her on the head with something or whatever. But at least, I mean, there is a subtext of like, you know, they should count their lucky stars that there's a woman on board, because otherwise Earth would be fucked.
Absolutely. Yeah. It does. I mean, it does harken to the, like, you know, men left to their own devices are probably going to screw this up.
Oh boy, do they ever, man? I mean, the luckiest guy in this movie.
And in the context of the film, they can't exactly help it, but they sure don't go, you know, a semi-attractive alien female, I guess she's all right. And even after, and again, it goes to the, and especially at the end, but early on.
Don't mention that yet, because that's gonna be good.
Once she kills somebody, so they do the whole thing. They find her, they bring her in. And like you say, she looks at each man, is like, oh yeah. And at first you think, wow, she's, you know, really
like he's
big,
a juicy steak. She looks at them, but she looks at each of them like a starving person looks at a turkey leg.
Yeah. You picture the cartoon thing where like they're drumsticks or they're like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like Bugs Bunny, like old Looney Tunes. And then she looks at the woman and is like, bitch.
Exactly. But that was the only way that could go. Honestly, I watched this film. The thing about this movie is that it's completely predictable every step of the way. So I knew that was going to happen. I knew that John Saxon was going to be an idiot and be like, you know, wait, which one is it? There's John Saxon who says, no, we don't need to tie her up, or was the other guy?
All of them.
After she kills the first,
none of them.
She kills her first victim, and one of the guys is like, "Maybe we should tie her up," and the other guy's like, "Nah." And I was like, "Oh my god."
Yes. We'll just give her some blood plasma. She'll be okay.
So,
not only that, they give it to her like in the standard drinking. Like, well, if you need to drink some blood, I mean, I know you totally drained our friend.
Here's your sippy cup full of blood.
That dude's totally dead. But we understand, because we're of different cultures, that sometimes you just kill a friend of ours. And a member of our team who may or may not have a replacement as far as skill set on our spacecraft. But that's how it goes. So, you know,
it's fine with everyone. It's fine with Basil Rathbone. It's fine with everyone. They're all like, yeah, that's what happens. Sometimes you lose your friends to aliens that eat them.
But, you know, that does track with Alien.
Yes, it does.
Where we've discovered that the corporation kind of knows or has some idea about what might happen. And they really do just want the alien. Yeah. And that's how it is here, too. Again.
Like soldiers. They're just
the difference is in this one,
people sometimes.
It's not a secret here. That's what's interesting is this fits into the 1950s and 1960s kind of either skepticism or heroism or both of men of science at the time, as just crazy fuckers who will like sacrifice everything for science, even crazy things. And it serves the plot because it allows everybody to do really idiotic things. But in the world of the movie, every idiotic thing they do, they explain as, well, we're scientists, so we can't have emotions about these things. I guess she didn't mean to kill somebody. Let's just start giving blood. It is
Yeah,
astonishing.
No, it's actually very realistic that he's so scientific about the way he looks at it, because he's like, well, think of it like how we eat animals on our planet. And John Saxon's like, no, we don't drink blood. And he goes, yeah, well, but that's just, that's neither here nor there. We eat rare
Because
steak,
a rare
whatever.
steak is covered in blood.
And that is a very scientific way to look at it. However, I still think, and I am going to skip to the end on this comment just real quick, I still think that you should take precautions, unlike at the end where Basil Rathbone says, we're going to take every precaution, which is no precautions whatsoever.
Yeah, but it's a precaution. He's like got them like on a tray.
Yeah, with no gloves on. His fingers are literally touching the stuff. But anyway, so that's the thing, is that they take no precautions, which is not a scientific thing. I mean, I'm sure scientists or astronauts watching this were like, that is so not how any of this would go down. You would have gloves, you would have and nowadays in the movies they do have, big old like in Independence Day, when they have that big glass room that the aliens said or whatever. And so they do have other things now, but there it's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna put her on this cot and we're not gonna restrain her in any way or take any other precautions.
We have Silence of the Lambs to thank for this. I believe it's ever since Manhunter and Silence of the Lambs, we really enjoy the filmic possibilities of sticking anything behind a big hunk of glass. So even Loki and the Avengers get stuck behind glass. So yes, if they were to make this movie today, they'd go, oh, well, we got her. We don't know what kind of diseases she carries. We don't know if we're going to kill her with our breath. So we need to stick her in a controlled environment until we know more about her. We need to wear hazmat suits when we're around her. Yeah, they don't do any of that stuff. It's clear to me that the writers probably never even gave it a thought. Like not.
No. Even for the time, like every single reference to science is so wrong.
Yes.
So badly done. So completely inept, and like their idea of how long it will take to get from the moon to Mars, for example, and it's just
Isn't it? By the way, isn't it something like a year? Just like traveling.
It depends on what side of because like sometimes Mars is on the other side of the sun from us. Sometimes it's on the same side. So I think that it's like at the closest, it's like 3 or 4 months away for like the ships that we have right now. Like if we pointed them in the right direction. But other times,
you're right.
Okay with the idea that they have technology that we don't have. That's fine. Like the idea that they might have super speed, but I don't care about that so much.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's just when it's convenient for the plot, because then at the same time, it's like, oh, Alan's got to stay behind on Phobos because 3 people can't fit in the. It's just like completely for convenience sake, and then it's not even a particularly good one because that whole line is completely dropped. I mean, other than we've got another ship that can go pick him up, and so there's no real.
Explain that whole plot line. It does get dropped, but at least explain it so that we can.
So to kind of let's get ourselves back on track. So they're expecting the ship, but then all they get is like a little probe SOS kind of thing falling into the ocean, because the ship has crashed on Mars. So they send a ship to Mars, and they have issues. They get struck by a solar flare, and so in order for them, to be able to, because they only find the dead alien on the craft, and they're like, oh, there's a pod that was ejected, and who knows where it is. They need to have satellites around Mars, and so that's when the fiance, and his buddy Alan go in a ship that's basically ready, and they fly the satellites there, and they land on the moon, Phobos.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that that's where the alien escape pod was. So they
for those of you listening to this going, that makes no sense. It didn't make sense in the film either.
I couldn't sum it up in a way that makes it.
You're doing great. By the way, this is fantastic. This is the best anybody's ever summed up the plot of Queen of Blood.
So it so happens, so they launch the satellites, and now they've got to fly down to Mars, and there's like, it's like there's a ticking clock kind of thing. Oh, you've only got 30 minutes, so get your asses in gear. And they're like, oh, well, we want to like poke our heads outside and see, what Phobos is like. And like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Come down to Mars. No, it's all right. We'll be fine. and they happen to discover,
alien chick.
they find alien chick, and they bring her on board, and the Laura is frantically calling for her fiance. Hey, where are you? And no, we found alien chick. We'll be down in a minute. Oh, but there's only all three of you can't come back. There's only room for 2 people on the little thing, the escape pod from your ship.
Or whatever. Mm-hmm.
But so like they're like landing ships and like just leaving them there. Oh, so we took this $1 billion ship and we flew it to the moon.
Yeah, right.
We have to leave it here, and we're going to take an escape. It's like none of it makes any sense at all. It's all
like, I know science, not logistics. Okay, like, I can tell you all the physics, but logistics that's covered by Basil Rathbone and his team. Come on.
Yeah.
That's the excuse they're going to use anyway.
It is hilarious. So I'm getting these characters mixed up, but John Saxon's character is Alan, and his friend is Tony. So they're like, oh, we got to flip a coin, and there's like this moment of, okay, who's going to stay behind? Is it going to be his fiance? Is it going to be no? Well, his friend stays behind. But it turns out it's okay because there's a third ship that they can send in a week or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting it ready in a week. It'll be ready.
It wasn't ready yet. That's why they didn't send it initially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So he's just going to kick back on Phobos. He's got enough food, and he's taking soil samples, and that's it. That's all you. You never fucking hear anything else about.
The important people here are the actors-wise. You've got Dennis Hopper, who is not engaged to anyone and therefore is the most available to the alien chick that he immediately is attracted to, even though she's green and way older than he is. Then you have John Saxon, who is engaged to our young female astronaut, whose name is escaping me at the moment.
Laura James, yeah.
Laura, thank you. And then you have Tony, is what you said the other guy's name is.
But Tony's on the and then you have Anders is Dennis Hopper's buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 3. So there's when we were dealing with alien chick on Mars, you have 3 men and a lady, and then the alien chick. And so the 3 men. The first they try to communicate with her, and all she just communicates with her eyes, which is, I loved how this woman acted with only facial expressions, like she didn't have any words. Awesome. She's really great with that, and like you said, with the whole like lusty look at the men, and then the angry look at the female. And then so they can't. She definitely won't allow them to take her blood and try to take her blood. So that's clearly a thing for her. But she will take some water out of a straw that Dennis Hopper teaches her very seductively how to drink out of. And
she won't eat any of his nasty chocolate cracker.
No space cookies.
That was really funny. And so then whenever it's sleep period, and we know it's sleep period because a giant sign, like the kind of signs that they show at in live studio audiences where it's like, applause, applause. It's like, sleep period, and it's like a siren goes off. So we know it's sleep period, and so everybody goes to sleep. And there's also an eating one for that, too, a meal period.
I know.
And so they all go to bed except they leave one person to be the sentry, basically, with the chick, and it's Dennis Hopper. And so now somebody else can take over the Dennis Hopper storyline.
Well, what I wanted to dig deep into was the fact that we did create this whole logistical problem, which is, I think, supposed to be familiar to the audiences who've watched a lot of war movies, and there's lots of ships that can carry only so many people, and and so you flip, and so the notion of one guy stays behind and maybe we'll rescue him, maybe we won't. That's familiar from other better movies as well.
I just realized if I ever had to go back to teaching, maybe that's my word problem. So how would you get your astronauts off if you could only send one? And it's the age-old logic
thing where you're
problem.
Like sending a little craft across a river, and it has to come back and like get one more guy. And,
exactly. So you can do that, and then if any of your students solve it correctly, you can go, student, you're smarter than all the people, all the scientists on that ship. But
I was watching another fine American film. I think it was called Attack of the Flesh Eaters, and this one was where these guys go to an island, and there's been some nuclear testing, and it's caused creatures that are electrical and eat flesh, and it's from the 50s, and it's the same thing. It's got it's got a good scientist who knows science, and by the way, this is capital S science. They never bother to explain what the heck any of that means, but then you've always got these other scientists who are just dunderheaded because they're so dedicated to some sort of oblique kind of decision making that has to do with science and with learning and getting facts that we don't have so far, that they're willing to make profoundly unwise decisions that are clearly unwise to the audience, and I still haven't been able to figure out the reason I'm confused by all of that is because in these same movies, those are two sides of the same coin. Like Gene Barry in the 1953 George Pal War of the Worlds is one of those scientists who is skeptical of whether the Martians are to be trusted or not be trusted, but at the same time, lots of the scientists in there are stupid. So there's this kind of love-hate, fear-love relationship on the part of Americans with scientists in this period.
Well, now it's just mostly hate, but
yeah,
that's where we're at, unfortunately.
So
Yeah.
let's see. By the way, through all of this, can I just say really quickly, I love the color in this film.
Oh man, yeah.
It is so bright and vibrant, and people always say, it's good, but it's not as good as Planet of the Vampires. They don't know what they're talking about. This is so colorful. I love this.
Yeah, I don't say that.
Her. Oh, Julia. I love the commentary. Like, yeah, man, all the time when I'm out and people are like, that movie's pretty good, but it's no Planet of the Vampires.
I know that comes up at least once a week with me.
I hear you. Probably a lot in your practice, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like you're trying to help somebody.
You'd be surprised at how many immigrants, watch these movies and comment on them on a daily basis.
Come from the Planet of the Vampires.
Well, they're comparing,
El planeta de los vampiros.
Yeah. You're trying to help them, and you're making small talk, and they're constantly going, shh. I've seen a lot of American films. None of them are quite as colorful as Planet of the Vampires. Wouldn't you agree, Julia? And you have to go you have to inject your own.
Grumble.
Yeah. Oh, this soft chestnut.
Oh, man.
So in that color though, like her makeup, also the alien like bright green makeup, she has that crazy weird this is aliens in the 60s like onion head hairdo.
Yes.
Which is very strange. The thing that struck me is because they do so much with her eyes, because she hypnotizes with them, they shine this light in the center. I found myself wondering how they made her eyes constantly bloodshot.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it can't have been comfortable. That's all.
Right?
I kept thinking because it's part of the effect, or maybe it wasn't originally, and just the makeup made her do that.
Well, that's very possible, because all I was aware was the striking blue of the woman's eyes, but I suppose I guess you're right.
Every time they show a close up, they're bloodshot though.
I don't think it's a makeup at all. Or it might be an effect. I don't think it's deliberate at all. I think
no. What I'm saying is, how that I was curious if they meant that to be a thing. If they did, how did they sell it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna spritz salt water in your eyes. Or was it just an allergic reaction from putting on so much green makeup all the time, which could have happened too.
Right.
But that's one thing that struck me is like, oh man, they're all bloodshot. Like whatever's going on is uncomfortable for the whole shoot.
Speaking of her greenness, so when they bring they leave Tony, and so now taking off, heading back to Earth is Dennis Hopper, John Saxon, scientist Laura, and alien Queen sleeping on a cot, and
Brockman, yeah.
Oh, right, and right, Brockman, the sort of the captain, and she's super. One thing I wanted to mention about her greenness is in publicity photos of this movie, she was colored peach. I mean, they colored her skin human, which is now her skin is not a post-production effect, because there ain't no such thing. There is no. This is just green makeup. So all I can assume is that those production photos. The publicity photos were basically black and white photos that were then colored for the poster, and probably the poster artist didn't know that she was supposed to be green, but whatever. it's because it's a big opportunity lost because I think people
Or they
would
hadn't decided that they were going to make her green yet when they.
Yeah, that's
no.
true.
These are photos
After?
of the movie.
Oh,
It's yeah.
interesting.
So it's you but the at the time, any given movie they do these like a one sheet is like a big poster, right? So they do these half one sheets that would be vertical, and they would take up about half the size of a poster. It'd be good for a double feature, and usually those would have the information about the movie across the bottom with a logo and a production photo. And these had a bunch of these production photos, and for whatever reason they never had the queen be green.
Strange.
So anyway, so what? I
Well,
lost.
so getting back though to how she kills Dennis Hopper. So
Yes.
whenever she's so Dennis Hopper's entranced by her. He really likes her. He kind of wants to get with her a little bit, and so he's fine with having her to himself during the sleep period. But she does that kind of vampire-y eye thing where her eyes glow and suddenly he can't do anything.
Yeah.
And she just goes toward him and attacks him, and we don't see what exactly she does. She seems to attack him in sort of it was very strange. It was like,
First of all,
didn't seem
she
like
changes
she was
her clothes.
yeah, it was very strange, and I didn't understand what she was doing because we just see her back, and she's not even she's not even doing anything to his wrist at this point. But later on, we find out that she's drained him from the wrist, not from the neck or anything. So
I think
I'm not
it's
sure
just an
exactly what happened.
inconsistency. I think they just changed their mind because when they have her attack Dennis Hopper, she goes straight for his throat like a vampire.
Looks like it, kind of, yeah.
And Tony, take a moment here to share with me the theory that you had, like a good way to look at this whole film, because it really was cool.
One thing that I did notice as I was first watching it, and we've only seen this somewhat, this part of the story, and by transitive nature, Alien, is actually, if you go with the vampire part, it's actually the part of Dracula, the Demeter part of the Dracula novel told.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of that in the novel, but for this is like space Demeter.
Yeah.
In which, no one gets tied to the mast and everything like that, but it's more or less how that plays out.
Yeah.
You have a ship, there's a thing on it, it slowly stalks the crew. Everybody seems to be aware that there's something going wrong. We've seen a couple of movies, of course, since as of late, but in general, you only kind of find out about a little bits and pieces from the novel. But I as I was watching, I was like, oh, hey, look, it's the space version of the Demeter. Yeah. That's really cool. Although now that when you mentioned the eat and sleep signs, I just realized like she's far ahead. Her alienness is far ahead because she's not confused by the fact that the sleep time and the eat time for her are the same. She's nonplussed by that fact.
But the thing is, during these sleep periods, they dim the lights. Because this is essentially a haunted house in space or a haunted ship in space, like the Demeter being stalked by a vampire. They artificially create the idea of nighttime. Right. All the lights
I'm sure
are
they
dim.
do in the space station too. I mean,
maybe they do. I have no idea. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
No, because of science, they actually crank everything. It's the opposite of it.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of places I can think of in our daily world actually where they deliberately undo the effect of time. And one of them is casinos. If you've ever spent time in a casino, you cannot tell if it's 9 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock in the morning because there's no windows anywhere. The lights are always the same. The sound is always the same, and you're like, and it's always full, and you're like, I have no idea when it is or how long I've been here or what's going on, and that's disorienting. But in that case, it's disorienting on purpose. I have to say, hospitals are the same way. You spend like a day or so that you're like, a nurse came in, she took my temperature. I don't know what's going on, and I don't know if it's 2 o'clock in the morning or the afternoon, and yeah. But generally, we work really hard to create an artificial notion, if we have to, of like when it's nighttime, and they're doing it here. It's night, and so she is stalking like a ghost. I love the one when she, because the next guy she goes after, because yes, she kills Dennis Hopper. Everybody's all scientific about it, and it's just like, whatever. I guess we don't even need to tie her down. And so next she stalks the captain.
We give her blood plasma, which fortunately we have a bunch of.
Yes. Well, they she stalks the captain, and she does that neat like brain trick where he looks towards the big sort of lamp engine thing, whatever it is, and she seems to be standing there, and then he blinks and she's not there, and then she is, and then she's
He actually
closer.
does go for his gun, but her hypnosis works such that she can.
He eventually drops the gun. I want to bring something up about the deaths of Paul, the Dennis Hopper character, and then Anders Brockman. So Paul dies, and they have like this little ceremony, and Laura like quotes the Bible, and they dispose of his body. They shoot it out in space, and I'm thinking to myself, they're not in deep space? They're like a day or two away from the moon. Why do not bring his body for burial on Earth? Why would they? And then Brockman dies, and then they get word from the big boss. Oh no, you need to bring his body back so that we can examine it or whatever. It's so really that was just strange the way they behaved about their bodies. And
I think it does go back to like the burial at sea metaphor is fine, but the second one is because they finally got corporate about it and realized, we missed out on the first victim of a vampire in space, but we sure as hell are going to autopsy
We're not going to miss that
victim.
Why didn't you tell us about the first?
We didn't know it was a vampire the first time, but we're going to take advantage. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. So we definitely want that. Your friend is now autopsy meat. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. There was just something weird to me, though, Tony, about the juxtaposition of religious ritual.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's fairly common even today. Then.
Well,
strange. I don't know.
This is how humans behave. Isn't that interesting? How Contact made a big deal about that, where the one scientist was appalled that they were like having any kind of discussion of religion, but we always have, oh gosh, what's a good example? I mean, you remember the president at the Challenger explosion quoting about touching the face of God and everything, and it's just the way that Americans relate, and it's certainly the way we related in the 1960s, because if you think there was another one that where the religion kept turning up. War of the Worlds. This is the second time I'll have mentioned this, which admittedly 1953, and not so it's a fair time before 1966, but in that one also, the aliens were felled by microbes. And they don't say felled by microbes that adapted on this earth, and that's why we're lucky to be on this earth. They go that God in his wisdom placed on this earth. There was a civic religion. It's kind of and I'm not. I just find it fascinating. You look at this country and you go that we probably wouldn't bother to go that deep.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is maybe I'm hyper analyzing this, but most Protestant Christians tend to not want cremation because of bodily resurrection and things like that, and the notion of just having your body unceremoniously dumped into space.
But burial
juxtaposed with the religious ceremony seems strange.
Well, burial at sea is fairly common. And that's basically what it is. I mean,
but burial at sea is still on Earth.
Yeah, but once they're sailing space, it's the same.
No, I see what you're saying. It's right. It's kind of by
also,
analogy.
if God is omnipotent, he can grab your body out of space.
Right, I was going to say the same thing. I'm no Bible scholar, but it seems to me like it would be actually easier for God to grab your body out of space than it would be out of inside the earth, because it's celestial.
And also,
it seems like God would kind of go, "Oh, hey, this one's just floating right by me," whereas the other one I got to get it out from under the ground.
Yeah.
Also,
it was just a very strange juxtaposition.
No, I think it's it's
especially
striking. It's
given the way they behave, so coldly and scientifically about Brockman's death and so forth, which is like Tony said, moving into this corporate thing. But there's all this the specific verse that she reads is all about how God made us and things like that. It was a very unusual scene.
Well, bear in mind also, I watch a lot of movies, but by no means am I totally encyclopedic on this. However, I don't think it's been until fairly recently that we would see, certainly not in this era, film was, that we would see somebody start to espouse some religious belief and then have another character go, "This is BS. Why are you even bothering with that?"
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly
we've got a freaking space vampire on our ship,
right? But I think in general that level of perhaps, for lack of a better term, let's call it representation of atheism.
No, and especially in a funeral, because everybody understands that people need to grieve in different ways. Now, it's one thing to say, "I'd like to say a prayer because I, believe in God and I want to say prayer." It's another thing to have the captain go, "You pray." You know what I mean? That's kind of what happens here. It's like, you need to say the prayer because you're the girl, I guess. And so then, I don't know, but I still think it totally fits with the time and maybe with even military. I actually don't know if military funerals tend to be religious or not religious, or if it only depends on the person.
I don't know.
It probably depends on the person.
Somebody would have to call in and let us know, actually. I'd love to hear if somebody wants to leave a note on the Facebook page.
I am by no means the scholar on this, but I think especially as of late, you can requests are more likely to happen. If you're not religious or if you have certain religious preferences. But again, multiple times you'll have movies and even reality where people will go, "Hey, I'm going to say something," and they're like, "Are you religious?" Like, well, not really, but it can't hurt, right? There's this kind of attitude when it comes to burial and disposing of a body that you often get that. Well, I guess we should say something.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
it feels
indeed.
like part
but
of the ceremony that needs to happen.
Here's the actual quote that she says, which is Psalms 100, verse 4. "Know ye that the Lord, He is God. It is He that hath made us, and not we ourselves, are His people and the sheep of His pasture." An odd choice of a Bible verse. It's like nothing about my soul is moving on or blah blah blah.
So we walk through the
struck me as being really weird.
I think it's meant to comfort.
If the screenwriter is, maybe that's something that's stuck with them, right?
Well,
also, it is a script.
Yes,
where that could be maybe one of the most profound things. All right, this struck with me, and this character would probably say that because of these things that I know about the character that no one else who didn't write the script would know. That kind of thing. I don't know. That's how I always see it.
Let's talk for a moment about the writer, and then we'll get into the last sequence of this, which is where basically the stalking action part of the whole film. But Curtis Harrington, who is the director, is also the writer. Now, he is a very interesting dude. He wrote and directed Night Tide, which starred Dennis Hopper, which we did on this show, which was just an extremely poetic and strange low-budget film where Dennis Hopper is a sailor who falls in love with a girl who might or might not be a murdering mermaid. I mean, and it's mysterious and odd and cheap. It was shot, at Santa Monica Pier, and it's very strange and poetic and cool. And Roger Corman released it, and then he comes back and he does this movie. This is a guy who he's running at cycles that are way beyond what he's actually filming. I mean, so he's a very poetic and strange, guy who could make exploitation pictures. I don't know why he chooses that particular verse. If it were anybody else, I would say this is one of those nods that you give to the audience to comfort them, to make them feel better about what they're watching. You would often do that. You do stuff that just politically comforts a regular audience, so they just kind of nod, satisfied with their own choices. But he probably has more meanings than that, and I'm not sure what they are. So, but he's very interesting. And if you have an interest, you should totally check out Night Tide. Honestly, I really love that movie. Love it a lot. And we did an episode on it last summer, in fact.
I remember it.
Yeah. Oh, really? And you weren't on that one, right? Don't forgive me.
No, but I'm a faithful listener of the show.
Oh my God, are you serious? That's amazing.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Bless you.
Yes, indeed. Bless you. Bless you. Okay, so that takes us to the end of this picture, at least the final act, which is once all that's left are the two lovers who are the smart ones because they value one another over any of the other religions or fidelities that are presented in here, like a fidelity to science or whatever. They're like, no, we're going to do what we can to survive, and it doesn't matter what goes on with this queen. And they go, we'll tie her up, and all that's left are the people who agree with one another. So like, yes, tie her up, and so they tie up the queen. She cracks out a whole new superpower to
Oh yeah.
to escape from her bonds, which is that she has Superman style heat
Superman
vision.
eyes.
Yeah, she just goes and burns the ropes, and because she has those feminine vampire wiles, she goes after John Saxon, and this is the only action where anybody rescues anybody in this movie, and John Saxon is completely rescued by his scientist girlfriend. So
yeah, which is cool.
Power.
Well, and think about so this is something that, David, there could be a book written about, and which is, or Tony, maybe you're the one who brought up that you had seen some of these roles in science fiction movies and not in straight. Yeah, it was your point earlier. Is for some reason genre pictures are often willing to break the mold of Hollywood a lot more, and have more representation and have people other than white men doing all the action, so you can get like Night of the Living Dead in 1968, which is just 2 years after this. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because the risk is lower in a film like this. I don't know. I don't know the why. I think it would be a very interesting book for somebody to write. I just blathered a lot, and I apologize.
No, I think you're right.
An interesting point. I'm wondering too if it is because I have a lot of theories, but none of them are backed by any kind of research. But I'm curious if it's because all kinds of artists would like to be able to do that, but they have to work within the confines of the time period that they're in. Whereas science fiction, people can say, "Oh, this doesn't have to work in the confines of the time period that we're in because it can be the future or it can be another planet, and they don't necessarily have the same rules we have." Or if it literally is the kind of people who create science fiction are more likely to be underdog people, like root for the underdog kind of people, and so they're more likely to go, you know what, I want to see a different kind of hero than we usually see.
I it's got to be. I mean, with Night of the Living Dead, Romero auditioned, and Dwayne Johnson was the best performer who showed up to read that role, and so he played Ben.
And I want to say that I've been hearing lately in this last couple of months, I think in regard to Black Panther, but possibly in regard to other things too, that I've heard some black actors say that they were really, and I want to say it was Sterling K. Brown, that they were happy to have the opportunity to play a character who was black. That is the point of the character, was that they were black. It wasn't just, oh, hey, here's a character, and I'm just going to stick somebody in it who happens to be black. I think it was about Black Panther, but it could have been something else. But it was the whole idea of, I want to be able to play a character that actually is a black person, but is not a bad guy.
Whose race or culture is important to his personality,
Right.
Well, and again, exploitation was where you could find that before, because black movies of the 60s and 70s, those were films that took place in black neighborhoods that had black characters, and there was no mistaking the cultures and neighborhoods that they came from. But those were considered exploitation films, and some people have said, "What are you calling exploitation? These were our films." You're just saying that from the perspective of somebody who invested in them. And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that genre films, exploitation films, fantasy, science fiction, this is where you've been able to find things that broke the mold. Anyway, same thing here. The only heroic event that ever happens is Laura saving John Saxon from a female alien, which is, Saxon does, for what it's worth, Saxon does bravely, carry her body back earlier. So these two are the ones who do the heroic stuff generally.
Which it happens to be that we find out our alien queen is a hemophiliac for the alien version of hemophilia, where she gets scratched and bleeds to death. They find her, which is a little anticlimactic, but also tying back to Alien, where you see all the blood on the floor.
Yeah.
And Saxon's fine with just touching the blood.
Tying back to Alien, that it's the female who kills her, the female astronaut.
But we make the extra leap where instead of it just being blood, that in Alien it's also acid, which is crazy and cool. Right. But you can see how somebody would go, what if there's all that blood? What if that green blood also did, this.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
melted to the floor. Yeah.
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 By the way, I want to correct myself. I'm remembering now, it was Sterling K. Brown, but he wasn't talking about Black Panther, although he's in that. He was talking about This Is Us and saying what a privilege it was to play a character that you couldn't have another person in that role, because the whole point of the character is he's a black person raised in a white family, and he just has loved that opportunity. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify
He's
that
wonderful.
point.
I really loved him in OJ as well. He was just fantastic.
Great.
So yeah, and it is pretty abrupt that the alien got wounded and died. But then we kind of figure out, actually, it's never really connected in this way, but her survival is not particularly important, because what they realize when they land the ship is they open up the panels and they find that the whole ship is infested with eggs, grody eggs that anybody watching this movie today or then is going to go, holy mackerel, those are gross. You should be very careful with those. I'm not sure if you want those coming onto the Earth. I mean, they should be burning this ship,
Well, that's what John Saxon
Saxon
saying. He's like, I don't think we should bring these to the Earth.
Yeah, no, he wanted to destroy them all.
Yeah, the Earth scientist was like, no, we got to study these.
Basil Rathbone says, don't worry, we'll take every precaution.
And Laura is on his side. Laura is with him. John is like, no, we need to destroy this, and she's like,
Laura says we're the astronauts, not the people who make these decisions. But I think it's totally in keeping with how an actual astronaut would be. They would be like, I'm just following orders. I'm going to bring whatever they tell me to bring. And then Basil Rathbone with his, we'll take every precaution, and then I'm guessing we don't see this scene, but I'm guessing he literally picked them up with his hands and put them on a tray, and then with no gloves on, and carries the open tray out.
In keeping with the rest of the quote-unquote science, then he licked it.
Yeah.
I wonder what this tastes like.
But you know what?
It looks like Jello.
We laugh about this, and we go, well, how much better was Ridley Scott than this? But, what was that movie that Ridley Scott just did like 2 years ago? That was the prequel to Alien.
Prometheus.
Prometheus.
That had scientists behaving equally stupidly.
Yeah, the scientist who's interested in small organisms, and so he's not wearing a mask or gloves or anything, and he gets down into like hip deep water and stares at a cobra-like creature that I've never seen.
Man, that must be suck.
Okay.
It must suck to be a scientist going to the movies.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
I
never have understood why the map people can get lost so thoroughly, or the people take off their helmets. The guy who touches the weird snake creature.
Yes.
Yeah.
That happens. We live in a world where there was Crocodile Hunter.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So as far as when people go, no scientists ever do that, we see people touching creatures and getting close to creatures that perhaps, and we hear about it, people getting ripped apart or mauled or whatever.
Or releasing toxic substances into the world, that are not needing to be
right.
Right.
The part where they just decide, they go, the air is breathable, let's take off our helmets, had me just infuriated. The people always go back to the guy who touches the organism.
Yeah.
That didn't bother me. I mean, it was stupid.
Because you're saying people actually do things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the stupid time, and you hear about it, and you go, "Why were you close to a herd of X?" Or why did you put your hand in the stump with the Y?
Remember the grizzly man? This was a guy who was really into studying grizzlies. He was on the Letterman program. David Letterman said to him when he was looking at a bunch of his slides, he goes, am I going to read about you getting eaten by a bear? And by the way, that is what happened to that guy.
So that's why, everybody states that. To me, there's other parts of that I have problems with. That, although is somebody being dumb, didn't bother me nearly as much, because we see that kind of whoa, this is a weird creature. What if I touch it? You would think that you would know better. But we see people all the time who don't know better. Yeah. And
but they're typically not scientists.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, they're not usually scientists.
Possibly, but there's more than a few. There's more than a few cautionary tales of zoologists.
Yeah.
Well, what you do hear about with scientists is that they self-experiment. So they'll be like, well, I don't know if this is going to end up killing the people that it gets used on, so I'm going to try it on me first. You hear that one a lot.
Vaccines and stuff like that. Well, actually, one of the interesting persons that we learned what happens with extreme, radiation poisoning was a guy during the Manhattan experiment who he dropped a sphere. It was a radioactive sphere that had to be lined up perfectly, and he dropped it, and because he was using these special gloves to hold it. Then, in a panic to keep it from exploding, he reached down to pick it up with his hands and move it back to where it was supposed to be. And that action killed him, terrible. And this stuff happens. But yeah, anyway, my point is, so maybe realistic, not realistic, but apparently happening in 1966 and still happening.
Now, it would have been interesting if, and this isn't this movie, again, veering into the what if John Saxon had decided to blow up the rocket.
Yes.
Like, everybody leaves, John Saxon destroys it and himself.
Yeah, that actually would have been a better ending, honestly. It totally would. And I would expect that from Curtis Harrington, because that's how he wrote Night Tide. I mean, everybody dies except for Dennis Hopper in that one.
But imagine an ending where like Laura scratches the Queen of Blood, and then somehow she's infected and she's beginning to turn green, and she's beginning.
I kind of almost expected that in a way. There was like this one scene, I can't remember at what point, closer to the end, where I was like, that'd be interesting. But it didn't end up that way. I think it's everything. It's kind of what Julia said. Everything's kind of fairly predictable, including trust of science and corporation. Whoa. What was that?
Somebody has dropped a bunch of things. A bunch of precariously stacked cups, apparently.
Anyway.
I don't even know.
It was cat food. I apologize.
Oh, so it was okay. It was on your end, Tony. Okay, I was worried that I
me, David. I think
no, it was me. Cat food.
Okay, good. Okay. Anyway,
full of eggs.
So we actually get a slug line where it says "the end," and something I haven't seen in years, a question mark. So delightful. Look, this is a movie that was released by American International Pictures. These were the go-to guys for releasing drive-in films, and this is because of a historical accident with the way that movies were distributed in the United States. So back before AIP came up, a major producer like MGM would have owned both the films but also the movie houses, the theaters. Because of suits, and monopoly busting, the studios had to get rid of their movie theaters. And so consequently, there was a new avenue for competition for somebody to make the B films, the films that would be the second picture in a two-picture package. So whereas before the big studios would be making both the expensive movie and the cheaper movie that came right after, now there was room for these smaller companies to come up, like American International Pictures, to make these B films, sell them cheaply, and also sell them into drive-ins, which became a thing in the 50s and 60s. And so this is yet another AIP. It's gonna make a lot of those choices that are just sort of the ones to just end the film. I, like I say, when I saw this as a kid, I don't remember if I was terrified or if I just loved it, but it all amounts to the same, I suppose. Let's get our final thoughts, and I probably won't have one because instead I chose, for reasons that mystify even me, to lecture on the history of B films in America. So let's go. What order did we go in? I think it was Tony, Julia, David. So Tony, what are your final thoughts on Queen of Blood?
It is slow. It's not one I revisit, but I do really. There's some great sci-fi bits, and again, it's really interesting. I had forgotten just how close to track to Alien in so many ways, and how also it was kind of cool to go, oh wait, cool, Demeter in space, that's neat.
It's such a great observation. Fantastic.
There's some great actors and actresses in it that I really like. I think the alien makeup is cool. I think the actress who plays the alien is doing a lot where, she's given a silent part and has to make that compelling. It's, kind of a warts and all movie. It's not one I revisit very often, but I think it was fun to watch it. And I love, AIP style sci-fi. I'll watch almost any movie like this at least once. And they have, and again, it's kind of cool to see, for better or worse, the some of the higher budget Russian stuff, which makes you kind of want to go dig that up as well and watch something possibly better. I enjoy it. It's not something I'm going to revisit a lot, but there's a lot of cool bits that I find it fun to watch.
Wonderful, wonderful. Julia, what are your thoughts?
Well, before we started recording, David and I were hotly debating whether Dennis Hopper had a good performance here. And I felt like it was the most dull, just like non-expressive performance. And I kept going, Dennis Hopper, ladies and gentlemen, every time he would just give a completely dead face performance. But apparently David differs, so I'd love to hear what your perception was.
Yeah, no, I'll follow it up with some.
And then Basil Rathbone, or in this case Basil Exposition, because he keeps delivering lines that were like, okay, thank you for explaining that. That was interesting. Sherlock Holmes, is who he played before. Interesting kind of small part, but it was fun. Forrest J. Ackerman was there as his assistant in the background, but you don't really hear from him much. And then John Saxon, who's kind of the major player. So the performances were neat. I did really enjoy the females. I thought they were fun. I think the alien woman with her crazy face acting was very delightful. So I thought that was probably the most memorable thing about the film is the different performances, because there's so few characters and they are pretty memorable. But other than that, yeah, it's not a movie that I'm going to remember much about.
Yeah.
Wonderful. David, what about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty much a snooze fest, but I did. I had a lot of fun watching Dennis Hopper because he clearly was trying to keep it together. Like I even read that in an interview, John Saxon said the entire time that they were filming, he was just trying not to laugh at everything. And so to me, that comes across in his performance where he's like, just, I can't believe that I'm saying these lines. I can't believe I'm in this movie. And so there's like this bit of a twinkle in his eye. And then when he begins interacting with the alien queen, I thought there's some really interesting chemistry there. And I enjoyed those scenes and just felt like I just missed him when he was gone. But I mean, it is true that he's not putting his heart and soul into it. But he's just bemused by the whole thing. And I found that engaging and helped me to get through some of the boring stretches at the beginning. Definitely that alien queen, Florence Marley. I mean, she does a fantastic job. Really, really enjoyed her a lot. Would have liked to see her being more sinister and sneaking around on a larger ship with a bigger crew, so that she could slowly start, killing people off. But it's not the kind of film that they were making. It's not the kind of film we got. So, yeah, it was worth seeing, especially as a ultra low budget precursor to better films that would come just a few years later, a decade and change later. So yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting way to spend an hour and 18 minutes. I kept pausing and looking at how much time was left.
Well, that can happen. Yes. One thing that strikes me watching it is I think it's a really great example of the genre, anyway, of low budget science fiction films of this period. I think this is what else am I going to recommend to you? Most of the science fiction, the drive-in science fiction movies are not really fast moving because a lot of times they're low budget and so they pad things out. Mars Needs Women is hilarious but also pretty slow. I end up always watching them. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but Jason, to me, it's not the pacing that's the problem, because I have no problem watching certain types of art house films.
True.
No, Japanese films.
But those films are saying something with their pacing.
Yeah,
I mean, Ron says something with its color, and even if it's being slow, or Nosferatu the Vampire from 1979.
Right, another example. Yeah,
it's a very sleepy film, and deliberately so, and you can be riveted to it even when there's nothing happening. There's a couple ways you can watch them. You can watch them as just something to throw up, on the screen while you're doing some editing where you're just looking at typos and stuff, and you don't need to concentrate that much. Yeah. It can do that. You can study it for the time, and I think that's kind of what we do on this show, is to try to see what we can what we can learn from it. But you're absolutely right about everything that you said. So but it is a more enjoyable watch than a lot of pieces of the period. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, if you look at other drive-in science fiction movies like The Attack of the Eye Creatures, this is way far beyond that, but that's not saying much. So all right.
Right, but it's like no Forbidden Planet or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Oh no, God no. But that Forbidden Planet is a big budget film from a major studio.
Totally. Like much more money behind it.
And it's got Leslie Nielsen. Okay, let's get endorsements. If you have one to share with us, and we go back. We start with Tony. Tony, do you have anything that you've been watching or reading that you want to share?
Oh man. Yeah, I've been just so busy. I guess as I was watching it, the thing that I kept going for when they kept mentioning it is I got back to listening to one of my all-time favorite bands, Voivod. They have an album called Phobos. So every time they mention that, I somehow in my mind switch back to like, I should listen to that album again. Anyway, so that would be mine. Listen to Voivod's Phobos. Or if you're in a Mars mood, totally shamelessly, you could also grab Deserts of Mars. I would not be sad if you did that. But yeah, I don't really I've just been so busy. I think the only other things that, I started watching just some random stuff on Netflix, and also Gatchaman, which is out, which I got for my birthday. So Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, always a favorite, even if the DVDs for Gatchaman 2 are not perfect. That's what I've been watching as well when I can catch it. So
wonderful. Joya, do you have anything to endorse this week?
Well, if you have the means, I highly recommend seeing Hamilton because that was awesome. We saw it here in Denver and we really enjoyed it. But since that's not as easy to get a hold of, I'm going to also endorse Jessica Jones season 2, although I'm not as far into it as David is, but enjoying it so far.
Really?
I don't know if you finished it, but I know you were further along already when I saw your Facebook post than I am. But it's a very, very fun show, and it's a lot of fun to take in this second season. But if you haven't seen the first one, then go back and see that for sure.
Wow, wonderful. David, what about you?
Yeah, no, Jessica Jones. I like right before I called in to this for this conversation, I wrapped up Jessica Jones, and it's really, really great. It's very different from the first season, but I really loved it a lot. And definitely people who are interested in family dynamics and the strange relationship that can exist between mother and daughter. It's really great. I mean, it's not what, people who are looking for just like, superheroes slugging bad guys are going to be into, but it was really, really powerful. And I enjoyed it. The final scenes were pretty cool, pretty exhilarating, great storyline. Also, I guess it was about a week ago that just on a whim, I guess I'd read an article somewhere about Creep 2. And so my son and I sat down and we watched back-to-back Creep and Creep 2, these these horror films, these found footage kind of horror films that are really more like character studies than they are horror films about like a serial killer. And I really, really recommend them. They're strange and quirky and bizarre, and they're really. I mean, there's not a whole lot of scares and so forth. It's just really about the way a particular serial killer goes about a very unusual, bizarre serial killer goes about carrying out his work. It's pretty fascinating and twisted and creepy, which is perfect for the title Creep. So if you've never checked them out, I recommend.
Fantastic. Okay, what I'm going to recommend is something that is on the Amazon Prime video service, which is where you can. So Queen of Blood, by the way, is included with Prime. You can also catch it on YouTube. I don't know what the status of Queen of Blood is. It might have gone into the public domain, which happens with some films from the 60s, even though that's fairly young for the copyright of a movie, right? But whatever. It's a lot of places, but it's in Prime. But also in Prime, if you're there to watch Queen of Blood, you should check out Going Attractions, which is a documentary about the history of drive-in movies in this country. And it is especially pertinent to this weekend because one of the things they get into is how daylight saving time did not actually hit all of this country until the end of the 1960s. And daylight saving time is one of the things that wound up deeply damaging the drive-in movie theater industry. I had no idea about this. It was very interesting. Yeah, because it makes the sun go down later. And so that pushed the shows later, which means that kids couldn't come as much. And I mean, because families used to bring their kids to the drive-in movies. And so it altered the way that business worked. It was just one out of many injuries to the industry. But daylight saving time was a big deal in the death of our drive-in movie theater industry. So that documentary is called Going Attractions. There's also, if you want to just have something play on your TV while you do whatever it is else that you do, they have a thing called the one I'm looking at right now is drive-in movie ads, but they also have another one that is drive-in intermission ads, and it's just like an hour of things telling you to come down to the snack bar and get some hot dogs. Fabulous stuff. And Tony and I have spent probably thousands of hours at the Alamo Drafthouse, where they play a lot of this stuff all the time, and it's all fabulous. So for some reason, Amazon Prime has a lot of these things, and so
that's awesome.
You can just go nuts, like looking for industrial films and old drive-in ads and things like that probably are very, very cheap for them to make available to us, but are really worth a lot to me. So, well, that is our apropos of nothing discussion of Queen of Blood, 1966. I am so glad that David, that you could join us, and that Tony and Julia,
I was happy to. It was great.
You could. Oh, I'm thrilled, and we'll be back next week with I have no idea what. We'll find out. We'll find out soon enough. And everybody, if you were interested in this, or you think that we completely misrepresented something, or we gave short shrift to something, come to the Facebook page. Let us know. We will totally respond. We love it, and leave reviews. And if you like the show, tell your friends and play it for them. So, thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you soon.
You too. Bye.
Good night.
Bye, guys.